Today, we're going to talk about demonstrating cultural awareness. So, this is something that we all have to do on a regular basis, but it can be overwhelming, especially when we first start. As new teachers, we encounter all different kinds of cultures, and not just throughout the week or month, but even in a specific day. You've probably heard me say that we travel the world not in 80 days, but in 8 hours. And it's true, we can start in one part of the world and finish up our day in a completely different part of the world. Or if we have group lessons, we can have several different nationalities and cultures in one class. So that presents unique challenges, but also opportunities in order to learn and grow and demonstrate this cultural awareness. So a good place to get started is to remember that we ourselves should be proactive and try to be as culturally aware as possible. So why don't we begin with ourselves? Why don't we try to understand our culture? And that way we can explain it to our students when they ask questions about different things that we do or don't do. If we understand our culture, and where we come from, we'll be more likely to explain that to the student. Also, make sure to be a learner. Keep yourself informed not only of things that are interesting to your students, but even world events. Knowing and understanding what's going on in your students' lives will definitely help you in class. Understanding the language differences and then highlighting those differences can also have a positive impact on your students. For instance, highlighting the difference between a language like Portuguese and English may help your Brazilian students to understand why you're making a correction. For instance, oftentimes Brazilian students say, "I have a doubt." Now what they mean is that they have a question. So if you understand that that's what they mean, then you can highlight the differences. Portuguese, the language, uses doubt to mean question, but in English, we do have different meanings for those words. And they'll often be able to remember it more easily if they can make the comparison. Of course, cultural differences do arise. And so a couple things to keep in mind. First, remember there are many correct ways of doing something. So just because something is different doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. So it's always good to keep that in mind. Also, try not to be quick to take offense. Of course, we are dealing with all different kinds of personalities in addition to culture, so it can happen. But try to not be quick to take offense and let things roll off your shoulder. Keep in mind that all of us have different experiences coming into the class. Try to stick to the material so you don't go off topic too much. Staying on the material will help you focus, stay focused, and not get into maybe grayer areas or uncomfortable situations. If a student is passionate about something that you don't know a lot about, or maybe it's not how you feel, allow them to share with you or teach you about something. You don't have to agree, but by them being able to share and talk about it, they're learning just by using their vocabulary. Of course, we have opinions, and our opinions are just as valuable as our students, but in the classroom, they may not be as important. So it is important that our students share their feelings and opinions, but if at all possible, we want to try to keep our opinions to ourselves. Keeping in mind that our aim is to teach English, not necessarily our life views. Of course, that's not always easy, but if we use phrases like, "I see where you're coming from," that's interesting. A lot of people feel like that, or "Did you know that in English or in America we might?" It can help kind of curve some of those potentially awkward situations. So we can still kind of steer the conversation away from something if we are feeling uncomfortable. Of course, we also want to be respectful when we are making corrections. Of course, it's not rude to offer correction, so we don't want to avoid this. Some cultures actually will give you a lower ES score if you don't make corrections. So we definitely want to make sure that we do offer corrections. But don't interrupt your students. Allow them the chance to talk, and then when you give them feedback, go ahead and compartmentalize that feedback. So don't be giving a feedback, constructive feedback, every single time they speak, but maybe after everyone has spoken, you could make a note of a few things that you would like to correct. This shows great respect to your student. Keep in mind that just because a student is lacking English skills, it does not mean that they're unintelligent or lack of knowledge. So keep in mind and keep that in mind to respect your students. Of course, we want to be as flexible and adaptable as possible. So if one of our approaches isn't working, try to change it. For instance, if we are asking the students to do one thing and they're doing another, maybe we could ask once or twice more. But if they really aren't getting it, we don't want to beat a dead horse, and we don't want to embarrass the students. Be flexible, change your approach, and hopefully they'll be able to understand you, your directions the next time. And of course, part of being respectful is having a positive attitude and believing in the student because they can do this. Group lessons, as we mentioned before, present a unique challenge because there are oftentimes many different nationalities and cultures in the classroom, many different situations even. So try to encourage all of the students to share information and experiences. We want to create that conversational atmosphere so that the students can interact with one another. And so it's not just teacher-student conversation. We want to make sure that we address both our active and non-participating students. So even if our students have a symbol that indicates they don't wish to talk, we don't want to take that personal, and we don't want to ignore those students. They're still a live person in your class. So whether they're dealing with tech issues or simply at work, or maybe their baby is sleeping, we want to at least acknowledge them, welcome them to the class, and encourage them to answer using the chat pod, or if they would like to change their mind and participate, we want to encourage them to do that as well. And of course, I did mention earlier tech issues. We do want to resolve any tech issues we possibly can. So we don't want to just dismiss those. Of course, we can't use the entire class time to deal with tech issues, but if we can be balanced and have some messages we can type in the chat pod, that will help our students feel respected. Our English students endeavor to do correct pronunciation throughout an entire language. So it shows them respect when we try to pronounce their names correctly. Of course, we may not get it. I'm not very good with names myself. So don't be afraid to ask the student to correct you, and that shows a personal interest in them and wanting to get it right. And your students will respond to the respect you show. Lastly, providing equal talk time to all students will also show respect to each student in the classroom. We have 5 different areas that we used to look at for doing observations. And these are 5 areas that really are shown to influence our ES scores. Constructive feedback and praise, managing the online environment, building rapport, being student-oriented, and demonstrating language awareness. All can be achieved when we show respect to our student and are culturally aware. Well, I look forward to hearing about your cultural awareness and your cultural experience. Please feel free to share tips.